So what things do you look at when you are looking to put a company into our portfolios? What are you looking at in the characteristics of that fund?
It depends on the type of business they are. If you think every company uh, has its own factors, but certainly what we're looking for is we're looking for whether it is providing us with growth in earnings over time. Remember, we have a 3-year plus time frame, so whether or not those earnings are going to grow, how stable those earnings are. So, for a really mature business, a great example might be a Woolworths or Coles. They tend to be quite consistent over time, so you can really model those reasonably easily. Um, what their costs are and how variable they are. So if you think about a cost being fixed versus a variable cost, and a variable cost comes and goes depending on the amount of goods you are selling. So it's the breakdown of those expenses and what those expenses are, whether it's labor or whether it's reinvestment into technology. So again, different costs we look at in different ways. But broadly speaking, we're looking at what the earnings are, how easily they are to model, how simple the business is, what their costs do, which go to margin. So how much money they make on every dollar of goods that they sell. And then we work out what that is worth in terms of what are we willing to pay for that company. If something is really high risk and really variable, we will like to pay less for it. If something is really stable, really high quality business, a global leader, and I might use an example, I'm not sure if any of your customers use sleep apnea machines, but if we talked about a company like ResMed, it is a global leader in the provision of CPAP machines and all the accessories that go with that. They reinvest very heavily back into their product, so they're maintaining their competitive advantage. Their market is only about 10 to 15% penetrated, so they've got a lot of runway for growth. So you look at that and you go, we'd be willing to pay more for a business like that. If you look at something at the other end of the spectrum, something that, like the commodity businesses I was talking about before, where they can't control the price of what it is they're selling the good for, they can only really control the cost line. So a business like that, you'd be willing to pay a lot less for. So it changes based on not only the industry it's in, but the individual company. And so that's where experience comes in and a lot of research comes into the process. So it does vary significantly depending on the characteristics of the individual business. But what we saw over the last year, we think that valuation discipline was lost in a lot of sectors. And when you're very conscious about what it is you pay, that can potentially hurt you. But over sort of a 3 to 5 year time frame, it tends to normalize. So what hurts you one year tends to benefit you the next.